Okay, now that you guys have watched the background on Ernest Hemingway, I'm going to go over his general style. So make sure that as you are watching this, that you guys take the time to fill in the information on the note sheet that you were given. If this goes too fast for you, just know that I am going to post this on Google Classroom, so that way you will be able to access the actual Prezi itself and be able to finish taking any of the notes. It's really important that you guys not only keep in mind his personal background, but also his style, because it will make it really important when you go to read his short stories, because they are so much dependent on you understanding both of those elements. So, when we talk about Ernest Hemingway's style, one thing to note is starting with this quote. It says, "All you have to do is write one true sentence. Write the truest sentence that you know." So, finally, I would write one true sentence and then go on from there. If I started to write elaborately, I found that could cut that scroll work or ornament out and throw it away and start with the first true declarative sentence I had written. Up in that room, I decided that I would write one story about each thing that I knew about. I was trying to do this all the time. I was writing, and it was good and severe discipline. So, this quote really represents most of what Ernest Hemingway's style is like. He is someone who is going to give you short, succinct sentences. His stories that we're going to read are very short and straightforward. However, it's really easy to tune out or not be paying close attention as you read because things seem very simplistic. But you want to make sure as you read, you are paying hyper attention to everything that's going on, because if you start to sort of glaze or tune out as you read, you'll miss a detail. And that detail, while small, could have been critical to the whole story. So do not mistake his short sentences or his short, lower vocabulary to mean that his stories are simplistic, because they are just the opposite. He uses a very short and succinct style to talk about really intense and heavy subject matter. So, as we talked about with his background, it's important to remember that he was originally a reporter. When you think about being a reporter and working for the Kansas City Star, a lot of the rules that he had as a reporter was he had to use really short sentences, short, 5 paragraphs. He had to use vigorous English, and he had to be focused on positive and not negative. This background as a child and as a young adult, as he was writing these things, really influenced his style later on when he became an official short story and novelist writer. When we look at his style of writing, it falls under the category called modernism. So, this means that his works were often defined by prevalent questions of the self and feelings of alienation in a corrupt or a decaying society. So, a lot of times, as you read his short stories, and I might ask you guys to look at the message or the meaning behind this. Why was he writing this? What does it kind of teach us as readers? Oftentimes, it's going to come back to this idea of what was the character struggling with in their life? What self were they grappling with? Or what issue in the world might they be dealing with that's sort of impacting their overall world and society? Additionally, modernism writing typically is characteristically pessimistic. So instead of progress and growth, the modernist sees decay and a growing alienation of the individual. So again, we're dealing with a lot of a negative Nancy type attitude here. And it's not meant to be negative for the sense of being negative, but it's because there seems to be a real concern in the world that Ernest Hemingway is pinpointing and trying to show to us so that we are more aware of it as readers. So then moving on to the techniques of Hemingway's writing, he was always striving to write very simply and clearly, and he achieved this through a number of different techniques. His first technique is to use short sentences. So he is always very much concentrated on action rather than reflection. So unlike Charles Dickens, who is very much focused on reflecting and the characters going through these long drawn out thought processes or having these super long in-depth descriptions, you're going to find Ernest Hemingway is very much grammatically simple. He's going to give you bare details. You'll know a little bit of what's going on, but it's going to really force you as the reader to think carefully and make inferences in order to understand what's going on. So you're going to have to do a lot of that reading between the lines type of reading as you go through this, because while surface level, it's very simple. As I mentioned previously, these stories have so much more happening underneath the surface that you'll have to work through as you read. He also is known for having incredibly short first paragraphs when he opens up his stories. So, for example, here's what an excerpt from The Killers look like. This is the opening paragraph. It says, "The door of Henry's lunchroom opened and two men came in. They sat down at the counter." So again, very simplistic, but you want to kind of ask yourself questions as you're reading, sense of why are they sitting down at this counter? What brings them to the lunchroom? You have to be very aware of asking yourself these questions and trying to find these answers as you read. Then you have technique number 3, which would be to minimize adjectives. So adjectives typically are descriptor words, saying talkative Tim, having that descriptor that makes you aware that he is a talkative kind of person. Ernest Hemingway has a really clean style that avoids adjectives and uses really short rhythmic sentences that concentrate on action rather than reflection. So you'll occasionally get an adjective here or there, but it's focused on the way people are behaving versus what they are thinking or feeling. Then we have number 4, obsessive reviser. So this quote here says, "His work is the careful result of selecting only those elements essential to the story and pruning everything else away." So again, oftentimes what Ernest Hemingway would do is he would basically have this whole understanding about his characters and the world they lived in and the problems they were facing. But he wouldn't give all of those details to the reader. He only gives what he believed was the most important minimal information, the things that you absolutely had to know in order to understand his story. So unlike Charles Dickens, who spent an egregious amount of time describing everything that the character looked like and every element of the room to bring everything to life for you, Hemingway is the exact opposite. He will shed all of those details that he as the author believed were excessive or not relevant, and he just gives you the minimal information. This style of writing is what we refer to as the iceberg theory. So in Death in the Afternoon, Ernest Hemingway wrote, "If a writer of prose knows enough about what he is writing about, he may omit things that he knows, and the reader, if the writer is writing truly enough, will have a feeling of those things as strongly as though the writer had stated them. The dignity of the movement of the iceberg is due to only 1/8 of it being underwater." So basically what this means is Ernest Hemingway believed that if he was doing a good enough job to make you feel the things the characters were feeling and to make you understand what they were going through in a very minimal style type of writing, he was doing a good job. He felt like if I had to spend all of this time describing everything the characters were feeling and everything they were going through, I was not being an effective author. So as you can see here in the iceberg, what he believes is that everything below the surface are things that the author understands about the world, but he's only giving you this top part. And the expectation is that as the reader, you'll be able to do inferencing and you'll be able to pick up on this background information that he did not include for you. So for example, if there was some tragedy going on with the characters in a story, he won't tell you what the tragedy was. He won't tell you why the characters are so upset. You're supposed to be ideally able to figure it out by reading between the lines through the conversations the characters are having. Things like that. You're being given subtle hints about information, but you're not getting the full scope of what they've gone through. Additionally, dialogue is a large part of what you see Ernest Hemingway relying on. So conversation between his characters demonstrate not only communication, but its limits. The way Hemingway's characters speak is sometimes more important than what they say, because what they choose to say or choose not to say illuminates sources of inner conflict. So it's really important to be paying attention to tone of voice and to try to figure out what tone of voice these characters are speaking with, because that will really impact your understanding of what they're saying and sort of the emotion of what they're going through. It gives you a lot more information about the characters. Sometimes characters say only what they think another character will want to hear. So basically, the whole purpose of doing that is it captures the complexity of human interaction through subtlety and implication, as well as direct disclosure. So just like sometimes when you guys have conversations with your parents or your friends, and you choose not to say something, but someone else can pick up that you're not sharing the whole truth or you're not telling the whole story, this dialogue technique for Hemingway works the same way. Additionally, the stream of consciousness is a part of his style. So this is employed to reflect the changing states of mind of characters. So sometimes when Ernest Hemingway breaks away from a normal, simple sentence and structure, and he includes sentences with rhythm or repetition, this occurs when a character is lost deep in thought or drunk, and it helps the reader understand the feelings of the character. This is why we spend time before we're doing Ernest Hemingway to do poetry to help you guys better understand, rhythm and structure, because he relies a lot on the reader being able to understand that to help dig deeper into the personal lives and struggles of the characters in his stories. So that brings me to the end of your Ernest Hemingway overview. Again, if any of this you missed as the video was playing, I'll post this Prezi in Google Classroom so that you can access it. And tonight, make sure you read Hills Like White Elephants. Again, it's a short story, but you want to make sure you pay really close attention to everything in there, and that you want to be really thorough with the questions you need to answer on the worksheet that you were given. If you have any questions, I can answer them tomorrow for you in class.